The importance of external links for rankings is a well-documented SEO fact and part of conventional SEO wisdom. However, internal links can also impact rankings. Links, either internal or from external websites, are the primary way for site visitors and search engines to discover content. If a page doesn't have incoming internal links, not only may that page not be accessible to search engines for crawling and indexing, but even if it does get indexed, the page will be deemed as less valuable unless a lot of external links point to it. Examples of pages without internal links are product detail pages that are accessible only after an internal site search, or entire catalogs being available only to logged-in members. On the other hand, if a page doesn't link out to other internal pages, you send search engine robots into a dead end. In between these two extremes, internal links can lead crawlers into traps or unwanted URLs that contain thin, duplicate, or near-duplicate content. Internal links can also put crawlers into circular referencing. When you optimize the internal linking, remember that websites are for users, not for search engines. The reason links exist in the first place is to help users navigate and to help them find what they want quickly and easily. Therefore, consider an approach that balances links available to users with links that are available to bots. Build the internal linking for users and then accommodate the search engines. E-commerce websites come with an interesting advantage. A large number of pages creates a large number of internal links. The larger the website and the more links pointing to a page, the more influential that page is. Strangely enough, although SEOs typically know that the more links you point to a page, the more authority that page receives, many SEOs still focus on getting links from external websites first. However, why not optimize the lowest hanging fruit first, the internal links? When you optimize your internal linking architecture, you don't need to hunt for external backlinks. You need to increase the relevance and authority of key pages on your website by creating quality content that attracts organic traffic and possibly links, and by interlinking pages thematically. Let's see how e-commerce websites can take advantage of internal linking to boost relevance, avoid or mitigate duplicate content issues, and build long-tail anchor text to rank for natural language search queries. Crawlable and uncrawlable links. Before we move forward, a quick and important note. Don't blindly implement any of the techniques discussed in this section. Decide which solution best suits your website based on your business needs and specific situation. If you're in doubt, get help from an experienced consultant before attempting to make changes. A crawlable link is a link that's accessible to search engine crawlers when they request a web resource from your web server. For this course, an uncrawlable or an undiscoverable link is a link that search engines can't discover after parsing the HTML code and after rendering the page. However, that link is still accessible to users in the browser. Uncrawlable links can be created client-side using JavaScript or AJAX and by blocking access to the resources required to generate the URLs using robots.txt. Uncrawlable links are created on purpose and are not the same thing as broken links, which occur accidentally. Also, uncrawlable links are not hidden links. For example, off-screen text positioned with CSS or white text on white background. Because the main goal of e-commerce websites is to sell online, they must be usable and present information in an easy-to-find manner. Imagine an e-commerce website that doesn't allow users to sort or filter 3,000 items. However, this sorting and filtering generates URLs that present no value for search engines and in some cases limited value for users. Since the current crawling and browsing technologies are dependent on clicks and links, these issues are here to stay for a while. However, why do e-commerce websites generate overhead URLs, and why are search engines able to access such URLs? There's plenty of reasons. URLs with tracking parameters are needed for personalization or web analysis. Or faceted navigation can generate a large number of overhead URLs if it's not properly controlled. A/B testing can also create overhead URLs. If the order of URL parameters is not enforced, you will generate overhead URLs as well. So how do you approach overhead URLs? A compromise for offering a great user experience while helping search engines crawl complex websites is to make the overhead links undiscoverable for robots, while the links are still available to users in the browser. For example, a link that's important for users but not important for search engines can be created with uncrawlable JavaScript. Before we look at some examples, keep the following in mind. Decide whether there is an indexing or crawling issue to be addressed in the first place. Are 90% of your URLs indexed? If yes, then maybe you just need to build some links to the other 10% of pages. Or maybe you can add more content to get those 10% pages indexed. Would you hinder user experience by blocking access to content with JavaScript? Also keep in mind that hiding links from robots may qualify as cloaking, depending on the reason for the implementation. Here's a quote from Google. If the reason is for spamming malicious or deceptive behavior, or even showing different content to users than to Googlebot, then this is high risk. Additionally, consider if there are any other methods to improve internal linking, such as an improved website architecture. Please note that from an SEO perspective, I advocate using uncrawlable links only for the following reasons. To create better crawl paths to help search engines reach important pages on your website, to preserve crawl budget and other resources, and to avoid internal linking traps. There are a couple of methods for keeping crawlers away from overhead URLs. One of them is to use iframes. Let's say you don't want any links generated by the faceted navigation to be visible to search engines. You can embed the faceted navigation in an iframe and block the bot's access to that iframe using robots.txt. The advantage of using iframes is that it's fast to implement and to remove if the results are not satisfactory. One disadvantage is that you can't granularly control which facets can be indexed. Once the iframe source is blocked with robots.txt, no facet will be crawled. This screenshot highlights a classic implementation of faceted navigation. This type of navigation often creates bot traps. Another method for creating undiscoverable links is the use of an intermediary directory or file. The directory implementation requires including a directory in the URL structure. The directory is then blocked in robots.txt. Let's say the original facet URL is this one. Instead of linking to this URL, you will link through an intermediary directory, which is then disallowed by robots.txt. So now the URL contains the facets directory. Your robots.txt will disallow everything placed under this directory. Instead of a directory, you can also use a file in the URL. The controlled URL will include the facets.php file, which will be blocked in robots.txt. If this was the original facet URL, then using the robothead file, this is how the new URL will look like. And this is how the robots.txt will look like. Using JavaScript or AJAX is another method used to control access to internal links, to silo the website, and to eventually avoid duplicate content issues at the source. Search engines can already execute some JavaScript statements such as document write. They can also render AJAX to discover content and URLs, but only to some extent, and there are limitations to what they can understand. However, keep in mind that the major search engines evolve rapidly, and in a matter of months, they might be able to execute complex JavaScript. While search engine optimizers want to make AJAX content more accessible to search engines most of the time, when you want to control internal links, you aim for the opposite. You will use JavaScript or AJAX to generate the links in the browser, client side, rather than in the raw HTML. Depending on the implementation, those URLs may not be available to bots when they fetch the HTML and render the page. One application of this method is to generate clean internal tracking URLs in the HTML and add the user tracking parameters on demand in the browser. Let's say you have 3 links on the home page, and all those links point to the same URL, but each link is in a different location on the home page. The first link is in the primary navigation, the second one is on a product thumbnail, and the last one is in the footer. Your merchandising team wants to track where people clicked, and they ask the analytics team to track the click locations. The analytics and web dev teams will tag each of the 3 URLs with internal tracking parameters. The 3 tagged links will look like these. The tracking key parameter in the first link communicates to the web analytics tool that the click came from the home page, which is indicated by the HP string in the watches category located in the primary navigation. The other 2 URLs are similar, except that the link location is different. When the analytics team added these tracking parameters, they created 3 duplicate URLs, which is not desirable. Of course, in this scenario, you can use raw canonical to point to a significant URL, or you can use the URL parameter tool in Google Search Console to consolidate to a canonical URL. However, for our purpose, we want to have a solution that avoids creating the duplicate URLs in the first place. Here's one way to use JavaScript to avoid generating duplicate content URLs if you want to use internal tracking parameters. In the source code, your anchor text element will look similar to this. This URL is clean of parameters, which is great for SEO. The page featuring this link includes a JavaScript code that listens when users click the tracked link. When the left mouse button is pressed, the href is updated in the browser by appending the content of the param string attribute to the URL. This is how the URL will look like at the mouse down event. Now the URL includes the internal tracking parameter, tracking key. However, the parameter was added in the browser. It was not present in the raw HTML code when the bot accessed the page. Pro members can get the sample HTML and JavaScript code from the resources section of the course. If you decide to make uncrawlable links with JavaScript, keep in mind that Google can identify links and anything that looks like a link to them, even if it's in JavaScript. For instance, on-click events that generate links are the most likely to be crawled. Also, note that using JavaScript to create undiscoverable links for bots can be a demanding web development task. Such links may also hinder the user experience for visitors who don't have JavaScript enabled. If your existing website doesn't work with JavaScript off, you should be fine using AJAX links. However, if your website fully degrades for non-JS users, don't sacrifice user experience for SEO. This method is controversial because it delivers content based on the user agent requesting the page. The method is also known as user agent-based delivery, and the principle behind it is simple. When there's a request for a URL, identify the user agent making the request and check if it's a search engine bot or a real browser. If it's a browser, add internal tracking parameters to the URL. If it's a bot, you deliver a clean URL. Do you think this method is too close to cloaking? Let's see how Amazon uses it to add internal tracking parameters to URLs on the fly client side. If you go to their Call of Duty Ghosts Xbox 360 page while using your browser's default user agent and mouse over the Today's Deals link, you will get a URL that contains the tracking parameter ref. Now change the user agent to Googlebot, reload the page, and mouse over the same link. This time it's a clean URL. To change the browser user agent, use one of the many browser extensions available for free. And here's their HTML code. The top part of the screenshot shows the code when Googlebot requests the page. The bottom part depicts the code served to the default user agent.